Welcome to the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, where it's time for podcast picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. You'll get to hear about podcast recommendations for your podcast playlist, along with occasional interviews with other podcasters and video hosts. Now waiting for you is your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa. He's just like you imagined. But don't worry, we'll make it up to you somehow.
It's a Sherpa Samples Week on Podcast Picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. I may disagree with the Sherpa, but I liked all of the samples for this week, with the exception of one. There was this one podcaster who really wasn't all that talented, talking about these podcasts and, oh wait, that's this podcast? Never mind. Keep listening. It's not too long an episode, and it's one of my favorites too. Boy, it's a good thing I know how to sound credible.
Welcome to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. It's the podcast about, podcasts. And now, coming to you from Mount Podcastia, here's your host who wonders what's on your podcast playlist, Jim the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to Podcast Picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. That's me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, right here. Hello, waving. Can't see me waving. Maybe you can hear me waving. Yeah, that's me. I'm here in Sherpa-lu Studios, here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, where I overlook the millions and millions of podcasts that are out there. It is a Sherpa Samples episode, and that, for those of you who have never heard one before, is where I get to talk about some of the podcasts that are out here in Mount Podcastia that maybe you might want to add to your podcast playlist. And I was looking at this list, and these were some shows that I listened to a while back. It's end of February as you were listening to this. I think I listened to these in mid-January, along with the last batch that I did. And I just almost completely forgot about them. Some of them actually referenced like Thanksgiving and Christmas when I was listening to them and checking out the episodes. So I was thinking a little bit, and I think what I'm going to try and do is maybe do like one Sherpa Samples episode a month, at least, if I can. I think that's probably a good plan because, I mean, that is part of the purpose of this show, to introduce you guys to new podcasts. And I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and playlists that are out there aren't too many, but I've covered a lot of ground with many of them. So I think it's a good thing to just kind of keep in tune with what's out there in Podcastia and let you guys know about it. And also, I think when I do these episodes, I'll maybe do like some special artwork so that you know it's a Sherpa Samples episode the minute you phone. And if you'd like to hear it, then it's ready for you. And if not, well, there will be more stuff for you in the following week, as I will say for this week. So with that out of the way, why don't we head on into some Sherpa Sample? So these were some of the podcasts that I was checking out not too long ago, and I wanted to fill you in on them. And as I said before, maybe there might be one or two you might want to add to your podcast playlist. There were some definitely interesting podcasts on there. Some of them were very different, but we'll get into that. So starting with the first one, Just Creepy, and you can guess that it's Just Creepy Scary Stories. The last time I did a Sherpa Samples episode, I kind of complained about the horror podcast that I had sampled because it sounded like AI. And this is another one that sounds like AI. I don't understand it. They have these fantastic stories, and it's told in a very flat, unemotional voice, and it doesn't really build the suspense or the tension, you know? And as you know, I mentioned two of my buddies that I've had on the show before, Jennifer Page and Brandon Schexnader of I Talk to Ghost and Southern Gothic, respectively. Check out those podcasts because those two know how to tell a scary story. Ooh, I like it. BigDeal. It is a business podcast, and the episode I checked out was about something called the 3-2-1 method, and it is a more effective way of business communication. And this podcast is hosted by Cody Sanchez. So who else do I know that does a podcast about business communication? My buddy, Dr. Andrea Wojnicki. So I sent her the link to this episode, and she thanked me, and she said, actually, she's a very big fan of Cody Sanchez, too. That would be an interesting conversation with those two on the same episode. Andrea, come on, let's make it happen, my friend. Okay. What else? Yeah. The Michael Knowles show. He's not related to Beyonce, because there's a last name. That's her last name. Her maiden name, anyway. And it's mostly about politics, but the episode that I checked out was his reaction to some certain ads and stuff like that. So there wasn't really that much political discussion going on in this episode, but I imagine if you are a regular listener, if you are into the political discussion thing, maybe it's a podcast that you want to check out. The Dr. John Deloney show. I guess he's like a psychologist, and it's like a phone-in podcast. People phone in their issues, and one of them talked about arguing politics around the holidays. I told you this from a while ago, and he offers his advice on that. I like his delivery on that. This is a pretty cool podcast, and they do talk about a lot of different subjects, and you might learn something. You might have some of these little issues, and maybe you might want to reach out to Dr. Deloney himself, or even just check out some of the other episodes. The Julian Dorey podcast. It's kind of like mine because he goes into a lot of different topics. There's politics, there's true crime, there's scary stuff, there's pop culture, all sorts of stuff. The episode that I listened to with this one had to do with a discussion about UFO experts. So if you like a bit of a mix, this is a podcast that you might want to check out. The Bold and the Beautiful with Trixie and Katya. I have to tell you, this was actually one of the favorites of the 10 that I listened to. I really enjoyed this. They're two drag queens, Trixie and Katya, and they were very funny and very engaging. And it's not a drag queen podcast, if that sort of thing offends you. It's just two drag queens talking. And they were talking about going to see a scary play on New Year's. And just really great. These guys are great communicators and just very engaging, I think. That's what I would really enjoy. I was pleasantly surprised when I was listening to this podcast, but definitely one that you might want to check out. The Bold and the Beautiful with Trixie and Katya. SSSniper Wolf, that's the name of this young lady. I think that's her screen name for video games. I think that's what she mostly does, discusses video games, but I guess she does other things as well. This is like a new thing now. The reaction shows, and it was her reaction to a lot of videos that are out there on the internet. And she was pretty funny too, actually. Young lady, but very talented. So who knows? SSSniper Wolf, you may get an even bigger following. I think she has a pretty huge following as it is right now. Global News Podcast. This is brought to you from Australia, and this had Christmas stories in it. And it had all like happy, positive, upbeat stories. I like that. And the main story that I really enjoyed was there was a woman from the United States who was reunited with someone that she donated bone marrow to. And the man had stage 4 cancer, and the bone marrow donation actually saved his life. And they got to meet, and their families spent the holidays together. I mean, you can't get much happier than that, right? I mean, everybody's okay and happy holidays. That's pretty cool. And I know we're talking about that in March. And you're waiting for springtime. I know some of you like, when is winter going to be over? The Ryen Rusillo Show. This is a sports podcast from Barstool Sports, if I'm not mistaken. It was weird because I don't know if this happens in every episode, because the first portion of the show was a lot of discussion about sports. And then it kind of became an advice show. I don't know if they just kind of went off track and then they ran with it, or if they do this every episode. I was wondering if it's a sports show that gives advice or an advice show that talks about sports. Not really sure about that. But if you are into sports and maybe getting some advice, check it out. The Unsubscribed Podcast. This was another one I really wasn't too sure of. And it's a bunch of guys chatting, and some of the conversation was raunchy, but a lot of it had to do with the military. And I guess these guys were military veterans, and they were telling a lot of Army stories. We love the military here, of course, in Mount Podcastia. We thank you for your service always. Somebody had said in the comments that listening to them talk really cured his anxiety and made him happy and put him in a really good mood. And hey, somebody in the military is doing that for you. That's just amazing. So guys, keep doing what you're doing. And then maybe people won't unsubscribe and they will subscribe. And I know we did 11. Actually, we usually just do 10. Oh, you get a bonus. The last one is The Church of What's Happening Now. That's hosted by a guy named Joey Coco Diaz. And he's a stand-up comedian. I think he started around the 80s or 90s and has been doing it for quite some time. I think he took a little time off and then he actually got back into doing stand-up. The language in there, a little bit strong, but if you like his humor, you might want to check out his podcast. Yeah. Whew. We got through it. Okay, so now I will be up to date with my podcast listening, I think. I don't know. But let's head into the outro, shall we?
Listen and subscribe on podcast apps everywhere. And we're on YouTube at Sherpa-lution. Sorry, no video. You're welcome.
Thanks again for listening to Podcast Picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. And we have new episodes every Wednesday. And I guess we will be doing these Sherpa samples on a monthly basis because I just committed myself to it not too long ago. You remember all the way back then. We have a history together, I know. On Saturdays, we have Sherpa Selects. And those are the episodes from the first 9 seasons. I think we're in season 6. And been pulling out some good ones. I'd forgotten about some of them, and then bring them up again. I was like, oh yeah, this was a fun one. So a lot of the fun ones, a lot of the really interesting conversations that were had, and they will be rebroadcast and prettied up just for you, the listener. And if you are into the social media thing, Sherpa-lution is the word that you need. And you can find me on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok with all my little silly videos. We should probably have an interview episode next week. I got some things in the works. A lot of it is just scheduling, so sometimes it's kind of hard to get guests. But I always have something to keep me busy, don't worry. And I will keep the entertainment flowing. Is that what this is? That entertainment? Guess I must be on the right track then. Well, Rebels, I say to you, viva the Sherpa-lution.
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. The podcast is now over. Please disperse and tell everyone about us. As long as they don't put us back in jail. Viva la Sherpa-lution!